She's the artist behind the exquisite drawings of the plants mentioned within the Quran. And Sue Wickisons' paintings are now receiving worldwide acclaim. I'm really excited to have her and the writer of the book, Shahina Ghazanfar, join me in the studio. Hi Sue, thank you for joining me. It's such a pleasure to have you here in the studio. You are the artist behind this internationally acclaimed book now, Plants of the Quran. An incredible experience for us as Muslims to see plants from the Quran being depicted in these beautiful, glorious paintings, and you're getting great response from the Muslim community as well. How has this experience been for you?
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's wonderful to be here. It's been a very special journey for me, an incredible experience, and certainly the reception that we are getting at Kew Gardens to the exhibition and to the book has been, the exhibition has been on for the last 5 months, and the reception from people has been superb. You know, just the kindness that people have shown, the spontaneity of interest, people have taken time to write comments to us both and express what it's meant to them, whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim. It's crossing over cultures. It's been an absolutely incredible experience, and it's the warmth of people, and also everywhere I've been on my journey, people have been receptive, people have been interested, people have had generosity of spirit to help in whichever country I've been to, and that's been an incredible lesson for me, and one of kindness, and yes, I just it's been quite overwhelming, quite humbling, and it's opened my eyes. I'm learning a lot as well. So mixing with the Muslim friends and learning a lot more myself. So it's opening up my eyes, it's opening up my journey. And so I'm on an interesting journey. So
you said you had a phenomenal response from the Muslim community as well.
Correct.
What kind
Absolutely.
of response have they been giving you? What kind of feedback?
The feedback obviously to the illustrations is the beauty of the illustrations. With the illustrations I do show the dissection work, I show as much of the plant as possible and as accurate as possible. And so sometimes people have been saying, well, I never knew certain plants look like that. And then obviously they delve deeper and with the book, I mean the descriptions and history, etc. But in terms of the illustrations, people are saying, it's so beautiful, you've brought out something very beautiful. Some people are saying, I stand in front of the paintings and I feel calm. It's a phenomenal reaction to people, or that you've brought to the public something special about our faith, and in describing the plants and showing the plants and the beauty of the plants. And obviously it has to be accurate, but I want to show the beauty, behind the paintings, not behind the paintings, behind the plants. And so that's been a really interesting journey for me. And as I said, I've had such good feedback. I mean, nothing negative at all.
Wow.
And so that's been very humbling and very much an honour for me. And when I'm there at Kew, there's always positive feedback. I mean for both of us, and for the book, and for the whole concept, the whole project, everything, every part of it.
I've shared a lot of, like we do nowadays, a lot of WhatsApp forwards to friends and family, you've got to check this out, it's amazing. And I've had really great feedback as well from people like, oh wow, like really astonished. I think for many Muslims as well, especially even younger generations and older, it's very, it's something very different. We often, when we hear about religion and we hear about Islam, we don't often hear about this kind of, we know about the plants have been mentioned, but no one's gone into it with so much depth, and we've never seen it depicted in these glorious paintings. So I think, that is a phenomenal feeling for many, many people. But obviously to get to this stage, I mean, it's taken 8 years and it's taken immense research, travels to the Middle East back and forth, and a lot of detailed drawing and painting and artwork. Tell us a little bit about what one painting even involves.
Yes, it's a long journey, and just to give an example, for example, the date palm that I travelled to. So I have travelled to different countries. I've travelled up into the mountains in Oman to the Jebel Akhtar area, which is beautiful, and going back there 3 times and being taken around by a guide, an Omani person there, and seeing the plants as they're growing for generations. And so you're going back to heritage plants and plants as they would have looked, or how they look, and so it's true to the nature of the plant and that particular variety or the species. It's not just going to your supermarket. I wanted that authenticity. So to travel to find them, and for example, with the date palm, I went back over a period to Sharjah, to a farm in the desert to Sharjah, to Philly, and was lucky to see the Ajwa al-Medina date palm. And so recording it, the date palm, so there are several stages to working. So it is getting to see the plant, taking it apart, feeling it, smelling it, touching it. You just want to know all the dynamics, all the details about the plant. And so you're trying to get an accurate record of it. And so you're making colour notes, you're making composition sketches, as much as possible, and then you're starting to do, that's even before you start the final illustrations. So it's a long journey, it's travel, it's research, it's colour notes, it's preliminary drawings, then onto the final stages of the painting, and that will take hundreds of hours. Particularly with the date palm, with the little dates themselves, each one of those just on its own, once you've got to that stage, will take an hour and a half or 2 hours. And on this particular painting, there are 300 dates, so that's 450 hours just on one section of the painting. And so people, they say, how long does it take you to dash something off? But they don't actually realise that, with botanical art, nothing is dashed off. Everything is studied, is meticulous, is layered. It's a very slow process. It's a traditional watercolour process.
You must have a meticulous eye for detail and an immense amount of patience.
I try. I do wear these geeky glasses. I should have brought them with me. I do wear these geeky glasses. It's like a little magnifying glass, and you also use a microscope as well to dissect the plants and to have to show the dissection of the flowers, and you show the fruit, and so you're trying to show every aspect of it. And again, that was something, going back to your question about the reaction from people, and they said to have this level of detail and to have this topic at Kew Gardens in public, it's been so well received by the Muslim population. But as I said, it does cross over cultures as well. But so the paintings take hundreds and hundreds of hours to produce.
For many Muslims, you've said some Muslims have seen it, and they see them when they stand before it, they feel a calmness because it's acquainting them to their faith and their scriptures. Was it a spiritual experience for yourself in any way? I know you're not a Muslim yourself, but was there anything spiritual about this whole journey?
There was something, talking to a Muslim friend, and she was talking about, coming back to the date seed, and she talked about different aspects of the date seed, and she talked about the fatel, the little thread or the funicle on the top of the date seed that joins the seed to the inside of the date, the fruit. And I thought, yes, I'm familiar with that. And then she talked about the kitmir and the sheath around the seed, and I thought, yes, I've drawn that, I'm familiar with that. So I'm thinking this in my head, I'm not saying that to her.
Sure.
And then she talked about the nakir, the little dimple on the date itself. I thought, haven't seen that. So I thought I need to eat some more dates, just for research, of course. And each one had this tiny little dimple on it.
Incredible.
And so it was in talking to...
Each date had this tiny dimple on it.
Each one does. And I had never seen it. So it's a measure of, a deed, whether it's as good or bad, it's still important. It doesn't matter how small it is. And in the verses, they compare the thread or the kitmir or the nakir to, that is still relevant. It's still of importance, whether it's good or bad, that you're still judged. But it's as small as a tiny little dimple on the date seed. And so Shamila was coming from, was explaining this to me from her, point of faith. And I was looking at it from a botanical illustration point of view and looking at botany, and I thought, I need to look more closely. So it was a good message for me. And it was fascinating to see how we were both looking at the same item and seeing it from different perspectives. So then I had more of an understanding of her faith and her, the lessons. And there are so many, such positive lessons in the verses. And so it was fascinating to me. And so I'm on a journey. I'm learning. I'm inquiring. So the more I find out about the Muslim faith, the more I'm have Muslim friends, and there's a huge respect there. And that's a growing respect, and it's a growing interest, and it's a growing, I have a little understanding, but it's growing, and I want it to grow. I'm curious.
I guess one can get, as an artist, even blown away by the phenomenal detail of these plants when you look at them microscopically and so intimately. I mean, it's endless, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I have a story about haloxylon, which is a plant in the desert, and we included in the book. When I first saw it, it's just a tangle of stems, and I thought, as a botanical artist, you want something that you can really see, that you want something you're interested in, you want something that's to get your teeth into, that you can enjoy doing. I thought, this is going to be really boring. I was wrong. When I put it under the microscope, because I had little yellow dots on the stem, and I thought, what are these? And under the microscope, I realised they're 1 millimetre flowers.
Oh, wow.
And so if you do it at times 25, which is what I've illustrated it at, then the beauty of the structure becomes, more apparent. Then also around the fruit, there are wings around the fruit. And as the seed goes over, the wings change colour. And the most beautiful colours from pinks and apricots. And so what I thought was boring, I thought, don't take things at face value. Look deeper, inquire more. It's another illustration that's much larger. But it shows, I tell the story to people of, don't take things at face value. Look in deeper, there's always beauty there. And I had thought it was going to be boring. It wasn't at all. It was fascinating.
In itself, a very deep spiritual experience,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
Wow, amazing to hear. Shahina, you are the lady behind the idea for the plants of the Quran. Where did you come up with this idea from?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me over here. Where did the idea come from? Well, I've been working in the Middle East throughout my career, which is about 40 years or so, and I've been always interested in the plants of the Middle East. And together with that, I noticed that there wasn't anything comprehensive, nothing which would give a really good detailed view or an article which would describe the plants of the Quran. Quran is a very simple book, and the plants are mentioned several times in the whole of the book. And I started to look into that. I started to see, why are they mentioned? What are all the plants that I mentioned? Of course, growing up as a Muslim, we all know pomegranate and date palm. We open our fasts with that. So, we are familiar with a few, zaytun, we are familiar with a few of the plants. But when you actually look deeply into the Quran, you notice that they're not just 3 or 4, there are actually 22 plants that are mentioned. And to be able to identify them, I had to go into the history of the plant. And that really got me going, that part of the research. Being obviously a botanist, I know the plants quite well. I wanted to make sure where they came from, how their names got to be what they are. Because where they originated and they were domesticated, they were called something different. So they must have been, traveled over a period of time through trade routes into ancient Iraq, into the ancient Mesopotamian region, and then into the Arabian Peninsula, where the people, the Arabs, before even Islam came, they used them. They knew those plants, at least some of them. And that's how they got to be written down in the Quran. People were well aware of these plants, and they were mentioned not just for that this is a date palm or this is a pomegranate. They were mentioned in a metaphor so that people could use the plants or see the plants in a certain paragraph or a context which was very human. And I can give you an example.
You mentioned like the pomegranate and its links to paradise in its reference in the Quran,
yes,
for example.
The reference to the pomegranate certainly is. But what really interested me was a very common plant that we all know is mustard. We use mustard everywhere, and that is also mentioned in the Quran as khardil. And people obviously, if you know, the seed of mustard is really, really very tiny.
Yes.
It's almost microscopic.
Yeah.
And of course, Sue has drawn it, bringing that out quite well.
Wow.
And it says in the surah that, this is a translation from the Arabic, we should set up scales of justice for the day of judgment, so that not a soul will be dealt with unjustly. And if there be no more than the weight of a mustard seed, we will bring it to account. So people obviously knew mustard. They knew that each little tiny mustard seed was there and that it was really tiny. And that has been taken into the context of justice, that even if there was that much doubt, we will bring it to account. So in this way, I feel that the plants that have been mentioned in the Quran and the context that they have been used to is fantastic. We have lost, I think, the knowledge of plants over a period of time. But I think at that time people knew them more because there was not very much else going on. Yeah.
So you feel there is more meaning, more spirituality, quite a very mystical dimension to these specific plants being mentioned in the Quran. Like with the mustard seed, it's about weighing on the Day of Judgment. With the pomegranate, you also mentioned, I think, some links to paradise.
Yes, the pomegranate is quite interesting because pomegranate originated in sort of Persia, Iran, Baluchistan area, where there's still some wild plants can be seen, and a part of Central Asia. It's got lots of seeds, as everybody knows. It has been used by the Persians in their mythology for fertility. We, of course, in the Quran, it is mentioned as a blessing, because it's so much, there's so much in a very small fruit, and each seed is capable of making a new plant. So it's not, although it doesn't say that, but it is a blessing to have that. It's a blessed fruit. It also says it's a symbol of paradise, and it is an example of not to be excessive and wasteful. So even if you have a lot, there's a lot that you have, don't be wasteful. And there's a message in it, which is, I think, a very beautiful message that this plant has been taken in the context of the Quran to give.
Absolutely. I mean, of course, you know, there's a lot of inspiration that you have from the Quran, you have a fascination for plants, but it takes a certain kind of individual to embark on such a huge project like the plants of the Quran. Where did you get that desire and that drive and that aspiration to get this started and to get to where you guys are today, where you're getting international acclaim, you're getting fantastic reviews and feedback?
Yeah, well, I'm not too sure. I just hope that everybody has that ability to, once you start research, you want to go deeper and then deeper. I mean, just as Sue was saying, you really want to show accuracy, and don't take anything that you read in a book. You really need that background information. So for some of the names in the Quran, for example, I really had to look into various dictionaries, of course. Where did this name originate? So it wasn't the same as it's mentioned in the Quran. A very common example is onion. Onion is mentioned in the Quran, basal, but where it originates in Central Asia, it's called piyaz. In Urdu, it's called piyaz. In Pashto, it's called piyaz. When you go into the Central Asian regions, it's called piyaz. In Turkish, it's called piyaz or piyaz, something. So where did this basal come from? How did that happen that in Arabic, we know it as a completely different name? So if you trace down, in fact, it was very difficult for me to trace down, but basically the name means layers. So the name was taken from the fact that onion has got layers. If you start peeling off the onion, there are these layers, and that's where the actual Arabic name comes from. Anar, for example, which is pomegranate, it originates again in the same region, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran region, and it's always called anar. Anar has been how it is depicted in the Quran, it's Rumman, and it has worked its way through China into ancient Iraq, where the name has kind of changed. It is linked to it, but it has changed to Rumman.
So how has it been for you to actually get to this point now where your idea and your research and the drawings are now in a book form?
Oh, it's wonderful to see the book, because it's required, obviously it's taken me about 5 years, maybe even more, just to research just the Quranic plants. And because I'm a botanist, I'm a taxonomist, I'm used to that kind of research. But the feedback that we've had from Kew Gardens, people who've been entering and coming just to see the exhibition and to get to the book and buy the book, it's been absolutely fantastic. Absolutely.
Were you ever expecting this kind of an outcome?
Not at all. Not at all.
Really?
Not at all. I thought, it's a book. It's it's a very well illustrated book, and it will be like any other book. But what has really come out is that people have, how should I put it? I think for some of the feedback that we got is that they now look at the plants that are in the Quran in a different manner.
Yeah.
They don't just possibly read the Quran and say, oh yes, this is mentioned or that is mentioned. But there is something behind all that plant. Why is it mentioned? In what context it is mentioned? What is it telling you? Because there is a message in each of the surahs where it is mentioned, where the a plant or two plants are mentioned
Has
together.
this been feedback you've had quite a bit from people about them wanting to, when they read it now,
Yes,
they're reading it with a different
absolutely,
experience?
yes.
Which is incredible in a way. It's almost like you're inspiring people to look at their own scriptures, because a lot of people as Muslims, we're not encouraged from a young age to actually read the Quran itself, but we're being told within the Quran that we should be reading, reflecting, because it contains a lot of wisdom.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
the culture tells us not to read it because you will not understand it.
Yeah.
So in a way, you're kind of, this is like some people would say, this is like this is almost like not a dava, but you're encouraging people to explore the spirituality of their faith again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you're very right in that, because, the Quran is in Arabic, and we, as Muslims, we always taught to read it in Arabic, and quite a number of us don't understand Arabic.
No.
So we are reading it, or we're reading a translation. What a few of the people have told me, that your book has given us sort of like a pathway that we must read.
Yes,
and
amazing.
it is in English. I hope it will be translated in Arabic as well. That they can now look at the Quranic verses in a slightly different context.
Yes.
Which I think it's wonderful.
Absolutely. I mean, even for myself, I read the Quran on a regular basis and like to reflect upon it, but not being somebody who's too nature inclined.
Yeah.
That part's been missing a little bit. But by what you've been telling me, I'm like, I'm gonna actually, when I do come across all those mentions, I'm actually going to look at those a little bit more deeply, because I do believe there probably is a lot of symbolism in them, and messaging and metaphors and things, which I probably just bypassed and not really focused on. So definitely it's inspiring for myself, and it's something I'm going to share with others. But what are you going to be doing next now? Plants of the Quran, I know you've had your exhibition at Kew Gardens, but I can imagine that this is something that there'll be a lot of demand internationally, even on an ethical business level.
There is a fair
Islamic
amount
countries, tourism.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's more or less like a book tour. So I'm invited to give talks, say, for example, in the United States, in Canada, in Morocco. I wish to God that everything is good with them, and possibly to the Middle Eastern country, to the Gulf states, where we may be able to take our exhibition and give talks on the book.
Absolutely.
I mean, having the exhibition is one thing, but to have the book and somebody to talk about it brings in another aspect. It brings in another dimension to what is actually in there, and people are obviously more interested to read it. It brings a little bit more insight into the Quran, the message that is there.
Yeah.
My next project is actually on medicinal plants of the Middle East, in which I hope that I will do a similar thing, to go deeply into the origin of the plants, because a lot of the medicines come from plants. Mostly all medicines come from plants. So it'll be quite interesting to see how it all started.
And is that got any connection to the Quran itself, or is that going to be separate?
Some of the plants, of course, that are mentioned in the Quran are medicinal as well. They are. So, and several of them in the Arabian Peninsula itself, then wider Iraq. So I'm taking all that area, Jordan, Syria, all that area into consideration to write my next book.
So lots of travels for you.
A lot of travel, yes. Been to Oman, interviewing healers, interviewing sellers of medicinal plants. I've been to Jordan. I have not yet been to Syria, but hopefully to Lebanon, to some of the places, Iraq. It will involve, but all for research.
I would love to see these paintings in mosques. I would love to be able to purchase them as greeting cards on Eid. I think there's so much potential for where Muslims would love to be able to get hold of this beyond just a book. I think its potential is limitless, because it hasn't been done before, and it's been done in such an exquisite way that I think, the sky's the limit if you tap into that.
Yeah.
So back to yourself. So what's next for you now? Having a bit of a rest from painting, or are you back on the with the sketches?
No, I think I get itchy fingers if I don't paint for a while. So it's sort of ingrained, because I've been since going out into the bush with my father when I was a young child, and he instilled the interest in plants with me, and the observation of plants. So it started from way back from childhood. And
what did he do?
He was a teacher and an amateur botanist, but mostly a teacher in Africa. So I was born and brought up in Africa, and in West Africa. So there was a fascination for plants there. and then on to university, and then on to work at Kew at the herbarium there for 9 years.
And it all happened, your whole life journey was so that we could have these pictures. Thank you for spending your whole lifetime learning from your father and being in Africa.
Yes, this has been, I must admit, this whole project is a culmination of it's a career pinnacle for me, and it has been an incredible journey, as I said. What am I doing next? At the moment, I'm doing some commissions. I'm painting some very large commissions for a particular family in London, and a Gloriosa, Rothschild Yanum, and a orchid, and a moth, and the silk moth, and the birdwing butterfly, which are huge, but they want them bigger, so that's on vellum. And so I'm going into insects at the moment, which is interesting. But
wow, you're getting even more microscopic,
exactly.
Right?
Then you look at the tiny scales on the butterfly and things, and so.
And I think it's just going to be fascinating.
Absolutely beautiful.
Actually, mentioning that within the Quran, we talked about the fly.
Yes, and the ant, and the ant,
and the ant.
And the ant is such an incredible little. To me, that's the lesson of cooperation. And so, it's a fascinating thing in watching.
Teamwork.
Exactly.
Solomon and his army, and how they could communicate with the ants, and how the ants would converse with one another. And so it just mentions that I guess that's a reflection of how even the tiniest little detail or the tiniest little insect has immense potential, and you're going to be exploring that.
Yeah. So I hope to, I'm not sure about the next project yet, we'll see, but inshallah something will come through.
Sue, thank you so much for joining me here in the studio. It's been an absolute pleasure. Shahina, it's been a delight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to be able to get hold of the Plants of the Quran soon. I'm going to be sharing it even more with everyone that I know. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's it from me today with my interview on the Plants of the Quran. Join me for more episodes very soon.